My name is Lila Mercer. I'm 31 years old, and on the day I married the man I love, the loudest thing in the room was the row of empty chairs in the front. People always tell you that your wedding will blur by. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, happy chaos. And in a way, it did. There were flowers, candles, the smell of champagne in the air, Daniel's hand warm and steady in mine. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world, and for a few seconds at a time, I could almost believe that was enough. But then my eyes would drift to the front row, to the 4 chairs we'd reserved and labeled by hand one quiet Sunday afternoon, sitting at our dining table with cardstock and calligraphy pens like 2 kids doing a school project. Mom, Dad, Amanda, Mark, all empty. At first, I made excuses for them in my head. Maybe traffic was bad. Maybe there was an accident on the highway. Maybe my mom misheard the time, even though I'd told her at least a dozen times. Texted it, emailed it, sent a calendar invite like I was a project manager scheduling a meeting for her own life. I gave myself 30 full minutes of denial. It'll be fine. They'll rush in just before the vows. They'll sneak into their seats, cheeks flushed, whispering apologies like this is some romantic comedy. They didn't. My dad had always said he'd walk me down the aisle someday. It turns out someday was a lot more fragile than I realized. As the music started and the doors opened, it was just me and the aisle, and 100 eyes watching the space beside me where he was supposed to be. Daniel met me halfway and took my hand with that quiet, stubborn courage he has. I saw the question in his eyes. Are you okay? And I did what I've always done. I smiled. I smiled so hard my cheeks burned. Through the vows, the applause, the photos in the garden, the toasts from Daniel's parents who actually showed up and beamed like they'd just won the lottery gaining a daughter. Strangers to me a few years ago, but there, present, all in. My side of the guest list looked thinner. A few cousins, some friends from work, people who loved me. Yes, but not the people I'd pictured in the front row my entire life. Amanda, my little sister, was supposed to be there. We'd had a complicated relationship, sure. Her, the golden child, the one everyone was sure would get married first, the one my parents were always a little more indulgent with. But still, she was my sister. We'd whispered secrets in bunk beds and shared clothes and screamed at each other and then cried and hugged like sisters do. She'd sent a text 2 weeks before. So excited for you, big sis. We'll celebrate so hard. And Mark was my first real best friend. The first person I ever told my darkest secrets to. He'd seen me ugly cry after breakups, coached me through job interviews, once drove across town at midnight when my car died and I was too scared to walk alone. We'd been each other's person before Daniel ever entered the picture. I'd asked him to be my best woman in reverse, stand up next to me, hold my bouquet, roast me in his speech like only he could. He'd laughed and said, "Lila, of course. I wouldn't miss it for anything." Apparently, anything included my sister's engagement party. I didn't know that part yet. All I knew in that moment, as we cut the cake and everyone leaned in with their phones raised, was that my purse buzzed on the chair behind me. Then again, a staccato vibration that cut through the music and chatter like an alarm only I could hear. I tried to ignore it. It buzzed again and again, relentless. While Daniel fed me a forkful of cake and everyone cheered, I felt my phone practically humming through the fabric of my dress. As soon as the photographer called a break, I slipped away. Our venue had a little side balcony overlooking the parking lot, quiet and half lit by a single sconce. The August air felt colder than it had any right to be. Or maybe that was just me. I pulled my phone from my bag and stared. One message from Mom at the top. We need to talk now. Then another. Call me, please. It's urgent. Underneath, a wall of missed calls. Mom, Dad, Amanda, Mark. Over and over, stacked like a roll call of people who had chosen not to sit in the seats I saved for them. For a second, I wondered if something terrible had happened. An accident. A hospital. Some disaster that would retroactively justify their absence. My heart leapt into my throat, fists of panic closing around it. I hit call. Mom answered on the first ring, like she'd been sitting there staring at her phone, waiting for me to break first. "Lila," she said, breathless. Not "how was the ceremony?" Not "congratulations." Just my name, sharp and loaded. "Hi, Mom," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Too steady. "Is everything okay?" We need to talk, she repeated. I didn't want to tell you today, but you saw the messages, so. I stared out over this parking lot at the cluster of cars belonging to people who had chosen to be here. Where are you? I asked. Where is everyone? She exhaled like I was being difficult. We're at Amanda's engagement party. Honey, you know this weekend was the only one that worked for his parents. They're very busy, and they've been so generous. We couldn't ask them to change their plans. I gripped the balcony railing so hard my fingers hurt. You scheduled her engagement party on my wedding day. There was a pause. We didn't schedule it on your wedding day, she said slowly. We scheduled it on the weekend that worked best for everyone important. Everyone important. I felt something tilt inside me. You knew the date, I said. You RSVP'd. You helped pick the menu. The venue they wanted, she continued, ignoring me, was only available this weekend. And you know how Amanda is? She didn't want anything cheap. You understand, right? You'd want your sister to have a nice day. Her tone was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that for a split second I actually wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe this was normal in their minds. Maybe I was the one who had misunderstood what family meant. Then she said it. You remember that transfer you sent us in July? She asked. We had to use some of it for Amanda's venue deposit, and the band, and the chef. But it's all for family, right? Your money helped both of you celebrate. My money. For both of us. Except I was standing on a balcony outside my own reception, my husband inside trying to keep the mood from collapsing, and my family was somewhere else, drinking imported wine on my tab. I barely heard the rest of what she said. Something about the groom's parents being wealthy and influential. Something about needing to make a good impression. Something about how Amanda's future depended on this going smoothly. And Mark, I asked numbly, where is he? Oh, he's here, my mom said. He offered to help MC. He's doing such a great job keeping things lively. He said he'd make it up to you later. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember walking back into the hall. I just remember the moment something inside me went very, very quiet. Not the silence of hurt or even anger. Just done. They thought I would swallow it like I always did. The dependable daughter. The supportive sister, the friend who understood. They thought I'd forgive them because that's the role I'd always played. But as I stepped back into the reception, surrounded by people who had actually shown up, Daniel's eyes finding mine across the room, I knew they'd finally pushed me past a line I didn't even know I had. They hadn't just skipped my wedding. They'd made me pay for the party they chose instead. And they genuinely believed I would thank them for the explanation. They were wrong. The morning after my wedding, the world looked exactly the same and completely different at the same time. Sunlight still slipped through the blinds in soft stripes. Daniel still breathed steadily beside me, his arm draped over my waist like a promise. Somewhere in the building, someone's shower turned on, pipes humming faintly through the walls. But there was this stillness inside me that hadn't been there before. Not calm, not numb, just precise. Like something had snapped into place overnight, and now all the blurry edges were suddenly sharp. Daniel stirred when I slipped out of bed. Hey, he murmured, eyes still closed. How's Mrs. Mercer this morning? I kissed his forehead. Figuring that out, I said quietly. Go back to sleep. I'm just going to make coffee. In the kitchen, the silence wrapped around me like a second skin. I measured grounds, filled the kettle, did all the tiny normal things you do on any other day. Except it didn't feel like any other day. It felt like standing at the edge of a cliff and finally realizing you don't have to keep backing away from it. You can decide to climb down, or jump, or walk in a completely different direction. I took my coffee to the table and opened my laptop. No ceremony, no dramatic pause, just clicked the trackpad and went straight to the one thing I knew I needed to look at, the accounts. I'd been the bank of my family for so long I barely noticed anymore. It started small years ago. My dad fell behind on a couple of bills when work slowed down. I sent money. Amanda's tuition hit a snag. I covered the gap. My mom just needed a little help with groceries one month, so I gave her a card linked to an account I funded, told her to use it when things got tight. Eventually, Amanda got one too. For emergencies, I'd said. I hadn't really thought about how big the emergency had gotten. The login screen blinked at me expectantly. I typed in my information and pulled up the joint account my mom used. Transactions populated in neat lines. Dates, vendors, amounts. Most of it was normal. Grocery stores, pharmacy runs, gas stations. The background hum of a life. But then there were other entries. Lux Banquet and Events. Deposit, $3,200. Lux Banquet and Events. Remaining balance, $6,400. Savor Catering, $7,000. Bridges Floral Studio, $1,980. La Belle Boutique, $3,600. Blue Note Jazz Quartet, $10,002. And then one that made me lean closer, heart ticking slower instead of faster, like my body knew it needed to conserve energy to process this. Skyline Rooftop Lounge, open bar invoice, $8,900. Event date, same as my wedding. Under host name, Lila Mercer. They hadn't just used some of my money. They'd used my identity, my wedding night, my name, my accounts. I clicked into the emergency card Amanda had access to. More charges. A 3-night hotel suite booking at the same downtown hotel as the engagement party venue. Name on the reservation, Mark Sullivan, my best friend, my almost best woman. Paid in full through my family emergency account. I stared at the screen. The cursor blinked in the corner like it was tapping its foot, waiting for me to catch up to what was already obvious. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This wasn't thoughtless. It was orchestrated. Planned deposits, coordinated dates, carefully chosen vendors. A whole event built on the assumption that I would pay for it, and that even if I found out, I would forgive them because that's what I always did. I thought about my mother's voice the night before, breathless and annoyed, about having to explain anything to me at all. You'd want your sister to have a nice day, right? I realized then that in their eyes, I wasn't a daughter, a sister, a friend. I was infrastructure, a system. The one who wired money, who smoothed over crises, who absorbed the hit so the show could go on. And I had kept the show running for years. I took a slow sip of coffee. It tasted burned, but I didn't care. Then, very calmly, I started to turn off the lights they'd been using without asking. First, the grocery account. The card my mother used multiple times a week. I clicked Manage Account and saw her name listed as an authorized user. For a moment, guilt pricked me. My mother buying bread and milk, her standing at a checkout line with a declined card, cheeks flushing pink. Then I remembered the imported wine, the live band, the open bar in my name. I clicked Freeze Account. Confirm. Next, Amanda's card. The one she'd used for emergencies that apparently included designer dresses and floral arrangements. I opened the admin panel and reported the card as lost or stolen. The system flagged it, immediately locked it, and scheduled a new card to be mailed to my address. Then I picked up my phone. The catering company answered on the second ring. Savory Catering, this is Jenna speaking. Hi, Jenna, I said, voice steady. I'm calling about an invoice for an event at Skyline Rooftop Lounge under the name Lila Mercer. There have been unauthorized charges on my card, and I need to dispute them. Her polite tone faltered. Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me pull that up. Within minutes, the event was flagged as disputed. Payment pending. Services on hold. I repeated the same conversation with the banquet hall and the jazz quartet. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't dramatize. I simply stated the truth. I had never authorized any of this, and I would not be paying for it. By the time I closed my laptop, several of Amanda's plans had just quietly died. My phone lit up almost immediately. Calls from Mom, then Amanda, then Dad. I turned it face down on the table and let it buzz against the wood like some trapped insect I didn't have to free anymore. Daniel walked in a few minutes later, hair still damp from the shower, t-shirt hanging loose on his shoulders. He paused when he saw my face. You okay? He asked. Do you have anything packed? I asked. He blinked. Packed? For a quick trip, I said. Just us, somewhere far enough that my phone won't work. He studied me for a moment, then nodded like he'd already decided that whatever I was asking, he was in. I can be packed in 10 minutes, he said. Where are we going? A cabin, I said. I'll find one. He didn't ask why. That alone made my throat tighten. While he threw clothes into a bag, I opened a travel site and searched. It took less than 5 minutes to find what I needed. 2 hours away, tucked in the woods, fireplace, spotty cell reception, no nearby neighbors. I booked it without hesitation. In the car, as the city shrank in the rearview mirror and trees began to fold over the road, Daniel reached for my hand. Ready to tell me what's going on? He asked gently. So I did. I told him about the call on the balcony, about Amanda's engagement party scheduled deliberately on our wedding day, about the money, the open bar, Mark's hotel suite, The way my mother had made it sound like I was selfish for even questioning any of it. He didn't interrupt, not once. When I finished, he squeezed my fingers. "They never deserved you," he said quietly. The words landed somewhere deep, in a place I didn't even realize was still craving validation. For years, I'd twisted myself into understanding everyone else. Why they forgot, why they took, why they always assumed I'd be fine. No one had ever said out loud what I was starting to feel. At the cabin, our phones lost signal halfway up the winding road. The last text that tried to come through from my mother hung in limbo in the notification bar, half-loaded and unread. Inside, it was simple. A small kitchen, a stone fireplace, a creaky bed. We built a fire, made pasta from the few groceries we'd grabbed, and ate in front of the flames like the outside world didn't exist. Because for 48 hours, as far as I was concerned, it didn't. We didn't talk about my family unless I brought it up. We read. We walked under trees. We sat in silence that didn't feel like punishment, just presence. Every time my mind wandered back to empty chairs and clinking glasses at some rooftop party I'd paid for, I looked over at Daniel, curled up under a blanket, laughing at some stupid joke he'd found on his phone before the signal dropped, and reminded myself, this is my family now. This is who showed up. Back home, when we rolled our suitcases into the apartment and the city noise drifted through the windows again, I left my phone off on purpose. We cooked dinner. We ate outside on our little balcony. We watched the sky turn from pink to deep blue. I knew the moment I plugged it in, the world I'd stepped away from would come crashing back, full of missed calls and frantic messages from people who weren't worried about me. They were worried about what I'd turned off. Eventually, I sighed, walked over to the counter, and connected the charger. The screen blinked to life. For nearly 3 straight minutes, it vibrated without stopping. I watched the notifications stack. Voicemails from Amanda, from Mom, from Dad, from numbers I didn't recognize, vendors probably. One lone message from Mark. I didn't open any of them, not yet. Instead, I stood there and realized something that made my shoulders drop in a way they hadn't in years. For the first time in my life, they needed something from me that I wasn't already giving. And I had no intention of giving it. Somewhere, chaos was building. Parties were collapsing. Vendors were calling. Reputations were cracking. And me? I poured myself a glass of water, went back out to the balcony, and sat down next to my husband. For the first time in a very long time, their emergencies weren't mine. The next morning, after the cabin quiet, after the phone vibrated itself into a slow death, after the sense of distance between me and my family had solidified into something permanent, I finally opened the messages. Not because I wanted to, because I needed to know what storm was forming on the horizon. The first voice I heard was Amanda's. Voicemail number 1 was light, airy, fake sweet. "Hey, Lila, something's wrong with the card. Could you just unlock it real quick? We have deposits to finalize for the extension party next weekend. Call me, okay? Love you." Voicemail number 2 wasn't sweet. "Seriously? Did you freeze the account? Why would you do that? This isn't funny." Voicemail number 3 had lost any pretense of niceness. "You're being cruel. You're punishing the whole family over a misunderstanding. Just unlock the card for a few days, Lila, please." Voicemail number 4. "I swear to God, if you're doing this to embarrass me in front of people who matter." I stopped that one halfway. People who matter. My wedding hadn't made the list, but the people at her rope-lit rooftop soiree did. Next came my mother. Guilt was her native language. "Lila, sweetheart. Never a good sign. We never meant to hurt you. You were always so understanding. We thought you would just handle this differently. Amanda didn't think it through. None of us did. Just call me back." Then a second message. "You know we're behind on bills. We needed that account. Why would you escalate things like this?" And then the third. "We're your family. Families don't do this to each other." I almost laughed at that. Finally, my father's voicemail. Cold, controlled, like he was reading from a script. "We couldn't get a loan to cover the remaining expenses because of everything. You freezing the accounts has made things harder for all of us. You're tearing the family apart, Lila. We raised you better than this. You're making a mistake." Not, "We're sorry we missed your wedding. We're sorry we stole from you. We're sorry we lied." No, just that I was making the mistake, that I was the problem, that I broke the family. I stood there listening, feeling nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just confirmation. Like rereading a diagnosis you already knew was true. And then I played the last message on my phone, from Mark. "Hey, Lil, Look, things got messy. Amanda needed help. You know how she is. I didn't want to let her down. I'll make it up to you, okay? We good? We good. I deleted the message, not out of rage, out of clarity. I walked to the desk, opened my laptop, and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd started the night before. Then I began adding more lines. Every bill I'd covered, every transfer I'd sent, every emergency I'd quietly fixed, every time I paid Amanda's rent just for this month, every time I bailed my parents out of debt, every time Mark borrowed money and forgot to mention it again. I combed through years of bank statements, emails, Venmo notes, texts, little breadcrumbs of a life I had accidentally built as my family's safety net. Hours passed. The sun crawled across the living room floor and vanished. When I finished, the number at the bottom didn't shock me. I'd suspected it was high, but seeing it all in one place was like opening a ledger of my own disappearance. $137.04. That was the cost of being their daughter, their sister, their friend. More than a house down payment, more than a wedding, more than a future I could have built for myself. And they had thrown my wedding aside like it was a birthday dinner they forgot to RSVP, too. I printed the spreadsheet 3 times, slipped each copy into an envelope, mailed one to my parents, one to Amanda, one to Mark. No note, no explanation, just the title I typed at the top. Here's what it cost to be in my life. Then I picked up my phone, called my provider, and changed my number. I didn't tell them. I didn't tell anyone. Not a dramatic farewell, not a final confrontation, just a quiet severing. For years, they had pushed me to the edge of the frame so they could center themselves, so I stepped out of the frame entirely. 2 weeks later, Becca, my cousin, the only one who still talked to both sides, sent me a message. FYI, Amanda's engagement party collapsed. Like, completely. Fiancé's family not pleased. I didn't ask for details, but Becca sent them anyway. The florist never delivered. The band never showed. The caterer canceled because payment never cleared. Guests arrived to a half-decorated space. Amanda hid in the bathroom crying for 20 minutes while her fiancé's mother asked where the cake was. It wasn't revenge, just consequences. The first ones she'd ever actually faced. Becca added one final line. She lost it. Entire event fell apart. Everyone's talking. I stared at the message for a long time, then set the phone down. Not triumph, not cruelty, just relief. Relief that, for the first time in my life, their chaos wasn't mine to fix. Later that week, an email arrived from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line made my pulse skip. You deserve to know. It was from a woman named Lacey, Amanda's former friend. Someone I barely remembered meeting once at a barbecue years ago. She wrote, I thought you should know what Amanda was saying about you before her party. She was bragging about using your accounts. She called you her walking credit card. She told people you offered to pay for everything. She thought it was hilarious. I read it twice, 3 times. It didn't hurt. It just confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't only betrayal, it was performance. She hadn't just used me, she'd bragged about it. Daniel walked by, saw my face, and sat beside me silently until I handed him the email. He read it, then asked one question. What do you want to do about it? I didn't answer, not yet. But something inside me shifted again. Not a break, a sharpening. I wasn't going to scream, or fight, or beg anyone to believe me. I was going to tell the truth. Quietly, finally, and publicly. Not to ruin them. To free myself. I didn't post out of anger. I didn't post to punish anyone. I posted because lies, especially the ones told behind your back, grow roots if you leave them alone long enough. And Amanda had been gardening. Cultivating a whole mythology in which I was jealous, unstable, dramatic, selfish, anything except the truth. I wasn't going to let her rewrite me. Not again. Not ever. So I gathered everything. The spreadsheet, the bank statements, screenshots of transactions, voicemails, the photo, the one from my wedding where Daniel and I are cutting the cake, smiling through the ache, and behind us, in perfect view of the camera, the front row. 4 empty chairs labeled Mom, Dad, Amanda, Mark. Chairs they never even attempted to fill. I opened my laptop, typed a post, not dramatic, not bitter, just factual, surgical, like telling a story I'd been too polite to narrate until now. I got married last month. None of my immediate family came. They chose to attend my sister's engagement party instead. Many of the expenses for that party, including the venue, catering, and entertainment, were charged to my accounts without my knowledge or consent. I learned about this on my wedding night. No names, no insults, no rage. Just truth. Then I attached the photo and hit post. I closed the laptop, walked away, made tea, sat beside Daniel on the couch like nothing monumental had just happened. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. Within an hour, the post had spread far beyond my friend list, shared by coworkers, acquaintances, old classmates, even distant relatives. People commented everything from shock to heartbreak to disbelief. But the private messages, those were different. Some people apologized for not realizing what I'd been dealing with. Some shared their own stories of being the responsible one, the giver, the family bank. Some told me they'd seen similar dynamics and had been afraid to speak about them until now. And then came messages from people I didn't expect. The first one was from Amanda's fiancé's cousin. They had no idea. None. They thought you and Amanda were close. Then, Amanda told them she insisted the date overlap because you wanted to do a joint celebration later. Then, they're rethinking everything. The next day, Becca called. I answered on the second ring. You might want to sit down, she said. Daniel turned down the TV. I sat beside him. Amanda's engagement is paused. Paused. Not canceled. Not over. But paused. The kind of word families use when they want to sound gentle while something is falling apart. Becca explained. When the post went around, someone sent it to the fiancé's parents. They read it. Looked at the photo. Asked questions their son didn't have answers to. Started connecting dots Amanda couldn't unconnect. She tried to lie again, Becca said softly. But it didn't land. They pulled financial support for the wedding. They're taking space. Amanda had fallen from grace not because of me, but because her lies finally had consequences. For once in her life, she couldn't outrun them. My parents, meanwhile, went silent. Not a word, not a text, not a call. It wasn't the silence of guilt or apology. It was the silence of strategy. They were waiting for me to take it down, backtrack, explain it away. They didn't realize I had finally outgrown the version of myself who would do that. 2 days later, my mom broke the silence. She emailed, "Your post has caused confusion among people who care about us. It would have been better to discuss things privately. The family's reputation is very important, and this has hurt us unnecessarily." Not a single sentence of accountability, not one acknowledgement of what they'd done, just a request to protect the optics of a family that hadn't protected me. I didn't respond. 3 days later, Amanda tried reaching me through Becca again. She wanted to talk privately. She suggested we both made mistakes. She even floated the idea of rescheduling her wedding someday and inviting us to start fresh. I asked Becca a single question. Did she admit what she did? Becca hesitated, then, no, not once. That told me everything. The next envelope came from my father. Actual paper, handwritten. He said families have to stick together, that I was too emotional, and that he hoped I'd come to my senses. It was the same old script, the one designed to make me feel small for having boundaries, for wanting anything for myself, for daring to say no. Mark sent one last email too, long, self-pitying. He said I'd embarrassed good people, that I should have kept private things private. I deleted it, didn't even finish it. I wasn't angry anymore. That part had burned out. What I felt now was something cleaner, quieter, freedom, maybe. Weeks passed. No apologies, no ownership, only a family scrambling to salvage their reputation, not their relationship with me. And then, one night, Daniel and I hosted friends at our apartment. Just a small thing. Food, wine, soft music. People who had shown up for us, who laughed easily, who hugged tightly, who looked at me without expectation or entitlement. At one point, I stepped back and looked around the room. Every person there was someone who chose me. Not because I paid their bills, not because I solved their problems, not because they needed something. Just because they loved me, as I was. No empty seats, no place cards waiting for people who viewed my presence as optional. Just a full room, a full life. That's when I knew. I didn't lose a family. I walked away from a system and built something real in its place. A week later, Amanda sent one final text. No punctuation. Just 5 empty words attempting to drag me back into orbit. "We're still your family, Lila." It didn't hurt. It just felt distant, like hearing an echo from a house I no longer lived in. I didn't reply, not out of spite, because there was nothing left to say. They were my family once, but only as long as I disappeared inside of them. Now I'm here, present, whole, visible, and they are nowhere in sight.